this frickin' book. Hi, it's Sam, and today we will be discussing A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. And I recently just posted my book review of A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book in this series, and this is the sequel. And I'm super excited to talk about this book because it made me feel emotions that I didn't even know that I had, and I'm really ready to just talk about it with you. As with my other book reviews, I will be doing a non-spoiler section in the beginning and just generally tell you what I thought about the book, and then halfway through the video we're going to get into some more deeper discussions because there's definitely some things I need to talk about and get off my chest and just feel again. We're going to get real deep into this one. To start off, I'd like to say, Sarah J. Maas, where the hell is my pronunciation guide? In A Court of Thorns and Roses, we have a pronunciation guide that tells us how to pronounce all the different names and all the different creatures and all the different places. So before I even started A Court of Mist and Fury, I turned to the last page of the book, expecting there to be a pronunciation guide, and it's empty. That's not okay, because I don't know how to pronounce half the things in this book, so I have no idea how everyone else is reading them, and I don't really know how to find out. Is Azrael? I don't even know. Nuala and someone else, I don't know what their names are, so whenever I see their names in my head, I'm just like, Shadow Sisters, keep going. So I'd just like to say, I don't know if it's the edition I bought or what's happening, but we still need that pronunciation guide, and I'm expecting it in the third book because I don't like the confusion. Makes me feel vulnerable. Now that that's out of the way, we can actually get into talking about the book itself, which is the sequel to A Court of Thorns and Roses, which most of you on the planet probably already know of because I was pretty much the last person I know on BookTube to get into this series. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I'm pretty sure with Beauty and the Beast you can make the assumptions you want to make. It was a pretty slow read just because it took a lot of concentration, but I still thought it was pretty good, and I did end up rating it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It was a really enjoyable read for me, and as soon as I started reading it, a few chapters in, I knew I wanted to read the second book, and I had already heard that the second book was better, so right away I went to the bookstore and bought A Court of Mist and Fury, and pretty much as soon as I put down the first book, I picked up the second book and started reading it. And I just want to tell everyone right now, if you haven't even started the series yet, start it. Get through the first one. It's not going to be a difficult task to get through the first one. It's not going to be horrible, but just read it, and even if you don't like it, get to the second one. For me to really like a fantasy book, especially a series, I don't even like series, I like standalones. So for me to really get into a series that is young adult and that is fantasy, and to say that it is one of the best books that I've ever read is a super big deal. I know there were some problems in the first book that people had, and I discussed those in my first video, which I can link down below for you. Some people were really turned off of the series because of those issues, and now I myself did have some issues with the first book and the content that was in the first book and certain situations that happened and certain relationships that took place, but I still liked the book overall, so I decided that I would definitely read the second book. And I have to say that a lot of the problems people had with the first book and a lot of the problems I had with the first book were not really present in the second book at all. It was really nice to see that some of the biggest problems people had were resolved or worked past in the second book. So if you did read the first book and you're not convinced to keep on going with the series, I'm just telling you, the second book is a completely different experience, and it's a better experience. At least give it a chance. Pick it up, start reading it. I could tell from the first few pages that we were already on sort of a deeper level than we were with the first book. It's more in depth, it's more emotional, and even though it's part of the same series, and you can definitely still tell that, and you can definitely still tell it's by the same author, it's just a completely different book and a completely different experience, so definitely give it a chance. It was not really what I was expecting for most of it. Some of the stuff was predictable, but it was good predictable in a way that I wanted things to happen and they happened. But at the same time, there was things that just blew my mind that I wasn't expecting. And I think the book definitely has also a romantic focus, but at the same time it has a focus on friends and family and the importance of having like a supportive group around you. And I just thought that was a great theme throughout the book. And I also thought that a lot of the themes throughout the book were just so interesting. The places they go, the new magic they discover, the new things that Feyre's discovering about herself. To me, it just drew me right in. I picked up this book and I didn't want to put it down. It's a pretty long book, 600 and something pages, so it did take me several days to read, but when I was reading it, I would just read for big chunks of time and not want to stop and keep myself up till the middle of the night trying to finish chapter after chapter and wanting to keep going. So I ended up having to force myself to put it down a few times to get other things done that I needed to. I'm not going to give anything away, but for the last half of the book, I pretty much cried all the way through. And that was not just tears of sadness, it was tears of happiness, tears of relief, tears of every emotion that you could ever feel. So it was definitely a moving book for me. And even though the characters are not real, and even though the places they're in are not real, and none of the situations happened, I just felt like it was so real to me at the time. After I read it, my body was just like physically exhausted. Me being super dramatic, I was like, I don't think I'll ever read another book in my life, which obviously is not true, but at the end, I just felt like I was gonna be in such a reading slump and that I would grieve that book forever and never get over it. So that is what you're in for if you want to read that book. Especially after reading the second book, I would say the first one was a 4.5 because if we ever want a perfect picture of what a 5 would be to me, it would be A Court of Mist and Fury. So after reading A Court of Mist and Fury, that's my 5. And everything else has to kind of match up to that in order to receive a 5 from me. I would definitely recommend it, especially if you like young adult fantasy, especially if you like romance, especially if you like any other of Sarah J. Maas's books. I think that applies to most of you on BookTube, so I'd recommend it to all of you. That's pretty much all I have to say about the book without giving away too much. So if you don't want spoilers, you should probably click away. Okay, so now with some spoilers, I'd like to say that coming off of the end of the last book, I totally wanted something to happen with Rhys. The second book did start out with the romance between her and Tamlin, and we got a big picture into their romantic life and their sex life, and I was kind of like, okay, maybe Tamlin's pretty good. In the beginning of that book, I was kind of reconvinced into liking Tamlin a little bit, but then we get into him being a controlling bastard, basically, and locking her in the house and not letting her do anything she loves to do and pretty much just letting her waste away. We meet Ianthe. I don't even know what her name is, to be honest. I did not like her at first. I thought she was kind of just like this busybody, annoying character, and I was like, if the rest of the book continues on like this and this whole story is just her living at this manor and dealing with Ianthe and being locked up and getting married and stuff, I'm gonna be so freaking bored. Towards the end of that part, I was just praying. Rhys needs to come and save her, and he hasn't called in his deal yet. He hasn't had her come stay at his house, so he needs to do it sometime soon, and it's gotta happen, and it's gotta happen soon. And you know what? He did exactly what I wanted him to do. It was a little predictable, but at the same time, it was that good kind of predictable where you want something to happen so badly and then it does, and you're just like, yes, I was really excited about this part because I really, even in the last book, I wanted to see what the Night Court was about, and I was expecting it to be all evil and everyone was against her and she would have to be there sort of in secret, and it was a totally different experience. The Night Court, all the imagery that Sarah J. Maas wrote about the Night Court was just absolutely breathtaking. Imagining it in my head, I just think it would be the most beautiful place on earth. And then of course we get introduced to the other important characters in the book, which include Cassian and Azriel, I think is how you pronounce it, and Morgan and Amren. One of the biggest reasons why I love this book, it's just because it shows that Feyre finally has this support system and this family that she's really been craving, and she never even had in her own family. So it was just great to see that she finally had people who cared about her and who she could rely on and who she actually enjoyed being around. So that was awesome. I also thought it was so empowering that Rhys and all of his friends wanted Feyre to train, and they wanted her to embrace all of her powers, and they just wanted her to become this powerful fairy that they knew she could be and that she knew she could be, but pretty much everyone else in her life was making her feel like she shouldn't do that for a bunch of different reasons. It would be dangerous, it would put the different courts at risk, but Rhys and Cassian and Azriel and all of them, they didn't care about the danger it would put them in, and they knew that Feyre was strong enough to protect herself and to do things the way she needed to do them. I also love discovering what Feyre's different powers were over the course of the book. I do love like elemental magic, so to have all of these different things come together and she can use them all at once and use them in conjunction with each other, I just thought that was super cool. Pretty much past the second half of the book, all I cared about was the fact that I needed Rhys to just tell Feyre that he was in love with her, because there were different parts in the book where he accidentally admitted things to her that really showed his feelings, and there were also a lot of parts in the book where they just supported each other in ways that I felt were really healthy, and I showed a really good relationship, which is why I'm not as upset about the things I was unhappy with in the first book, with Tamlin being controlling and everything like that, because I feel like the second book gives a really good look into a healthy relationship where two people can support each other and be there for each other, and they know how to support each other without controlling each other and without being overprotective, and really letting each other still be two free individuals at the same time. And I absolutely loved that relationship and wanted to see it blossom, and then it finally did. The scene with the creature, which I am looking up how to pronounce its name right now in the first book, still not sure. The surreal. I always said surreal, so that's what we're gonna say. But when she sees the surreal and she asks it some questions, and then it says to her, "Oh, you didn't know that you were his mate," I literally stopped reading, I put the book down, and I just cried for like 10 minutes because I was like, oh my god. I know in the book Feyre's upset with Rhys because he hasn't told her that they're mates, but when I read it, was like, how strong of Rhys and how good of him to not want to convince her into that relationship. He didn't want to make her feel like she had to be with him. He wanted her to have that freedom of choice, and he wanted her to fall in love with him naturally and not just because of some other bond that he had that she wasn't even aware of. And I pretty much cried for the rest of the book because I was just so emotional about their relationship. Another scene that I thought was just wonderful was when, well, it wasn't wonderful, it was actually kind of heartbreaking, but at the same time it was a really good scene, was when all of the creatures from Hybern came and attacked Valeris, and Cassian kind of told Feyre to go in the apartment and stay safe, and instead she decides to fight, and she really kicks ass, finally. You know, she's had so many situations where she's just really wanted to beat the crap out of people, and she's just really needed to defend herself, and she hasn't really gotten that opportunity yet, and this was finally her time to shine. I cried because I was sad about the people of Valeris and about the city being compromised, but at the same time, I thought it was a turning point for Feyre, and I thought it was when she finally viewed herself as this like confident and powerful being that everyone's known that she is, but she hasn't really allowed herself to be for the whole book so far. In the end scene, when we see them all go to the castle and Feyre is supposed to speak the words from the book into the cauldron and make things happen, I knew it wouldn't go right. There was no way. There was still a good chunk of the book left, and I was like, there's no way that's just gonna go smoothly, but I wasn't expecting things to happen how they did, and I wasn't expecting Tamlin to be involved with the King of Hybern. When Feyre's sisters got involved, I was super emotional. I was thinking about my own sister and I was crying. Then when we find out that Lucien is actually the mate of Elaine, I was crying because even though I was mad at Lucien, I still love him, and I was happy that he was supposed to be with Elaine, and I thought that they would be a good couple. We see Cassian and how much he cares for Nesta, and I want that relationship to happen, so that was great. Then in the very end of the book, we think that the King of Hybern breaks the mating bond between Feyre and Rhys. I don't know if I was just being gullible, but I totally believed that that was happening, and I was crying hysterically. Then the last two chapters, we see that it was all just a scheme, and now Feyre is going to Tamlin's court again and kind of acting as like an internal spy, and Rhys is just trusting her to do that and really admiring her bravery and admiring her sacrifice, but still letting her have the freedom to do what she thinks is right. Again, just another example of why they are good for each other. So I am absolutely so excited for the third book, and I literally finished the book, looked up on Goodreads the third book, and there was pretty much no information. So I was kind of bummed, but then I went on the next morning and checked it again because I was so excited that I couldn't stop looking at it, and they posted something that said title and cover coming soon, and they also posted that the release date would be May 2nd, 2017, which isn't that far away, and I'm so excited to see the cover, I'm so excited to see the title, and just the fact that they announced that like the day after I finished reading this was perfect for me. Overall, I'd say I'd absolutely love that book. I am so looking forward to the third book, and I'm a little scared because I don't know if any of the books can be as good as the second one, but I still want to know what happens with the characters. I still want to continue on with the story, and I am definitely going to, and I am gladly going to reread the first two books before I read the third book. So I can't wait for that. I'd love to hear what you thought about A Court of Mist and Fury or A Court of Thorns and Roses series in general, so post any comments you have down below. And as always, if you like this video, please like and subscribe down below. I'd really appreciate it. And that's all I have to say. Goodbye.